Hello, me again. So I thought I would do 8 variations on a lunge. Lunges are great to stretch the hip flexors, which are really important in your splits and also in back bending. I do find they're kind of ignored. I ignore them myself when I do back bending. I never remember to stretch my hip flexors, but they are definitely important as well. So without further ado, here's some lunges. The first one I'm going to do is a 90-90 lunge. So that means that my front and back leg are both at angles of 90 degrees between the thigh and the calf. 90 degrees here, 90 degrees there. What I'm doing, I don't want a sort of sexy twerk moment. It's lovely, but that's not what we're trying to do. We want to have a rather unsexy anterior pelvic tilt, so I'm thrusting my hips forwards. If you do that, you should get a nice stretch in the hip flexor. If you don't, you barely feel anything. So tuck the pelvis, thrust it forward. So that's your first one. The second variation is a side arch position. So you can do this in your 90-90 lunge or in a more traditional lunge that is further back. I'll show it to you in my 90-90. So my left leg is forward, so my left elbow is going to go, left arm is going to go on the top of my front leg. Then my other arm is going to reach all the way above, across, like a side stretch. From here, I'm making sure I'm tucking my pelvis, going to the side, and also reaching back. So here, I'm stretching my hip flexor, and I'm also stretching my back on the actual back and the side. So it's a good prep if you're doing something like, a twisted cobra. The third exercise is a squaring one. So here I'm going to go into my more luscious lunge. So from here, I bring my arms up, and the same arm as my back leg goes forward on the outside of the leg. Then my back arm goes behind and reaches onto my thigh. You can also reach to the bum. And if you are using the back leg for stability, where you are tucking the toe, you will get a bit more purchase to get to your calf if you're more flexible. From here, I'm opening the chest, pulling the shoulders back to get this nice position. So why do we do this? Basically, during splits, if you want to make sure they're square, you do the same process of arms up, twist to the side and back, and make sure you're pulling your front leg towards you and your back leg away from you to make sure the hips are nice and square. So that is variation number 3. The next one is a crescent lunge. So here, I'm going all the way onto my back toe, a nice straight leg. You're probably not going to see my arms, but I lift the arms up and I really bend into the back leg, still making sure I am having a good anterior pelvic tilt and getting the stretch in the hip flexor. This to me is between active and passive, and it is quite challenging. The more you come down to it, the more you get a good stretch from the back. And make sure you're still bending through the front leg. From here, I'm going to go into my next variation, so number 5, which is the active lunge. So, put my hands down, the back toe is now going to point, so it's no longer tucked, and I'm going to try to keep the back leg as straight as possible. I come up to this position. It's very easy if you just bend down. That's what we don't want to do. We want to push the leg all the way up and arms up. It is definitely a challenge. It's very active, so I definitely recommend you do a bit of active hip flexor work in your routine. So that is number 5. Number 6 is using a yoga block. So why do you want to do this? Bit of variation, and it makes it a bit more difficult. It's also mimicking where you would put your block under your legs in an oversplit. So in an oversplit, you can put the block on your front foot, underneath your front knee, on your back knee, and on your back foot. In lunge, we can only do 3 of them, but I'll demonstrate them to you anyway. So I'll start off at the front. I position my block where it is. My right leg is going to go on it. I set up. I'm going to tuck the back toe and go into my lunge. this elevation is definitely making it a bit more difficult. It does add an element of balance as well, so it'll be good for stabilisation practice. So that will help you towards balancing well on your wine glass, bow and arrow, needles. So that is having it at the front. Then I'm going to put it on my knee. So for this, what I do is I kneel down on it, and what's eventually going to happen is going to end up just on top of my knee as I roll forwards. So I set up, I lunge down to here. So a bit less glamorous, but it does get a lot deeper in the hip flexor. This shouldn't be uncomfortable on your knee at all, really, because as you can see, it's partially on my knee and partially on my upper thigh. So that is the second variation, and the last one is having it on the back toe, and this is a killer. So I position my back foot first, and then come into my lunge. So doing all these exercises, make sure you are really tucking the pelvis forward and always feeling the stretch in your hip flexor. In these yoga block variations, you can also lift the arms as an option, and always make sure you're pushing into the front leg to keep that 90-degree angle, to keep a stretch in it. So, keeping the yoga block, although it's not necessary for this exercise, I'm going to do what I call a needle lunge, so it's active work towards the eventual goal of a needle scale, or just improving any position when you're reaching back behind you. So think of like any kind of layback in pole, or maybe contortion Scorpio, things like that. A lot of these stretches do have real life applications in circus and pole, so don't neglect them. So a needle lunge, I'm going to go into my sexier lunge. You can also do it in a crescent lunge, although the crescent lunge is more difficult. From here, I'm reaching the arms up, keeping that tuck in the hip flexor, and reaching back. I typically do this 5 times, and hold the 5th one for 5 seconds. If you're doing it without the yoga block, I will show you again. I just want to keep my hands about a yoga block distance apart, so 1 palm's worth. I reach back. It is definitely more challenging in the crescent lunge, so you've got less sort of contact with the mat, so it's harder to balance. But give both a go, depends how you find them. And the last one is a lizard. So we all want to be lizards basking in the sunshine, of course, so why not try to be like one? So I set up my normal lunge, and what I do here, I position my hands on the inside of my front leg. So I'm keeping a nice straight back leg, still tucking that pelvis, and coming into the position where my arm, or my inside arm, is aligned with my inside leg. So, can't really see very well, but my arm is there, and there. To make this more difficult, you can go down to your elbows if you want. Try to keep a straight back or curved back like you were doing a cobra, but most of the time just coming to this position is great. So that is all your lunge variations. So basically the main thing to remember is always make sure you've got a nice anterior pelvic tilt to really get the stretch in your hip flexor. If you want to make it more difficult, basically add some difficulties to stability, make it a combination stretch, or engage the back glute of the leg, because that will just intensify the stretch on your hip flexor. So, there you are. Hope you enjoyed them.